I'm Lauralee Harris. I've gotten involved with the radio groups through Wimberley Valley Radio, helping them do their grant writing, and through Austin Airwaves, helping them put up a couple of stations. Alberta Liquor Range is, we hope, coming online next year. So what we're going to talk about today is grant writing. How do you work with foundations? How do you write grants? It's actually, the grant is the money you get, and you write proposals for that money. So, but everybody still uses those terms, grant writing. You can reach me at the information on the handout. So we're going to talk about the fundamentals. This is a 4-hour session crammed into 1 hour for you. And there are sometimes I do it as a 2-day seminar where we actually produce the grants that people need to be working on. But I'm going to tell you how to do it, basically.
What's your name again?
Lauralee Harris. It is in the program, but it's not highlighted, and it kind of runs into Ann's. So we've discovered that. So you're going to build a grant. So how do you go about doing that? Like building your stations. You know, you're going to have a blueprint. You need to know what you're going to build. Is it really the best use of the funding that this organization is going to give you? Can you really make a strong case for it? LPFM has a very strong case, generally. And is it the right time and place to do that? There are local resources you're going to use. You can search the web. You're going to find the right investors, because what these are investors. Now, I tend to use business terminology, although I've got 35 years in nonprofit management and grant writing. I still think you need to see the nonprofits as a business. You need to run these as a business. So you're going to find the right investors. Not every foundation is going to be interested in you, and there's research you're going to have to do that. The Foundation Center is one of your resources. This is a subscription, not cheap, but if you're going to do your own grant writing, you need to be subscribing to that so you can do searches and find the right foundations. Yes?
Sometimes if you're lucky, your public library will have a subscription, and you can...
Most do, as a matter of fact. Most do, at least to some source, but this is the best one. You can subscribe annually, or if you're using a contract grant writer, they will have this available for you, for them to use for you. The Grantsmanship Center, grantwatch.com is great. Also subscription, but cheaper. But they tell you when grants are coming up. Really cool, because you'll miss things. Or there may be things you didn't think about coming up, and you can have it search by various types of grants or topics or geographic areas. Grants.gov, if you want to get into government grants, that's a good one for you. I'm going to talk about a USDA grant that we're working on for one of the stations in Texas. And then you can do web searches, of course. Through your research, this is what you're going to learn. You're going to learn your investor's potential. Do you have somebody that's a potential big investor, somebody that's a potential small investor? Are you looking at a foundation that's totally the wrong one for you? Let's not waste your time. So you're going to go to the foundation's website. You know, you've already done your search through something like the grants.gov or something. Or let's talk about the regular grant, the Foundation Center. You're going to go to that foundation's website if they have it. If it's a small family foundation, we're going to talk about different types of foundations. If it's a small family, you're probably not going to get a website. Some do, some don't. GuideStar. How many of you know about GuideStar? If you do, you can find lots and lots of information about the foundations on GuideStar because they have to file a report, and it will tell you who they fund. And the foundations sometimes have annual reports. Sometimes they're online. Sometimes you can call and get them to send you a copy. You just have to do your homework. So what are you looking for when you're doing your research? You want to know who they are. That means you want to know their history. Have they funded anything like you? Who their board and staff are, because guess what? You might know them, and you not know that they're even on that board, right? I've had that happen a lot of times. You need to know what they support. Does it look like you? And where are they giving? Is it geographic? Is it overseas? You know, yes, they fund radio stations, but it's not in America. Yeah, well, you're probably not going to get money that Jamel or Jeremiah. And then how much do they give? So you're going to be looking at their 990 to find out how much money they're giving to each of the organizations they donate to. You have to make a list. The exception to that is community foundations. They're a different animal, and we'll talk about them. But private foundations must have a list of who they've donated to, and sometimes those lists can be very long if it's a big foundation. But you're going to want to scroll through, and GuideStar's free. It just takes a PDF reader to be able to read the reports and some time to scroll through and read what they're telling you. But they have to tell you who they donated to and how much they gave. Some also will say what state it was in or even give you an address for that organization. On Foundation Center, you can search. The searches on Foundation Center are really good, and they've gotten better over the years. You can search by geographic area, so find the ones that have given in your state, and it looks at the grants that they've given and sorts them by state. And then they will look at, you can look at topics. So look at something that's giving to media or arts, or if you're wanting to fund some specific programming, environmental programming, health programming, you can sort by that. So let's find out what they give, how much they give, where they're giving. Types of foundations. Independent family foundations are the most common. You're going to run into lots and lots of these. They're usually established by one family. They're usually family-run with a few exceptions, and they often don't take applications. You'll see that on their 990, whether they do or whether they don't. Don't let it scare you. Yes?
You mentioned about the 990. How do we go about seeing that?
GuideStar. GuideStar.org, free. You just type in the foundation's name, and you'll get their 990s, and you'll see several years. And I always, as a consultant, I go back and look at several years because maybe they funded something 3 years ago that matches the purpose, but they haven't in the most recent. So I go back and look at several through GuideStar. And if this was one of the long sessions, we would go online and let you see how GuideStar works. We won't have time today. The problem with the individual foundations, the family foundations, is they're very closely held. They're like a closely held corporation. They don't have to talk to you. Now, it is the foundation's job to give away money, right? And everybody thinks it's easy to get that money. Well, you have to have some connections with these family foundations in general. Now, some are big, like Meadows Foundation. It's still a family-run foundation in Texas, huge foundation. And they take applications. They have huge staffs. But most are very local. Some won't accept applications. A little bit difficult to get into if you don't know anybody. Do it anyway. Call. Say, may I make an appointment?
They have their own applications.
Phone numbers are on the applications. Sometimes it will go to their accountant. That phone number will be the accountant rather than the person that has the management of the foundation.
How do you get the application from the foundation?
Call. Or some have if they're online, they'll have it online.
So, I'm sorry, this is something I've run into too, where they say we're not accepting unsolicited
donation, unsolicited.
Yeah, sure. You get
And you
it
just
from
say,
family.
you just ignore that and go ahead and solicit it anyway.
Yeah, I call. What I do is I look at who's running it, who's on the board, because in that 990 there's a list of the board of directors. So I take a look at that and I see if on my boards there's somebody knows somebody. If somebody knows somebody, then they're the one that makes the phone call. Please give me a call. That works pretty well. Or if you have donors that you think might have connections to any of these people, that works. But often you can just call and say, I know you don't take unsolicited applications. Just wanted to let the foundation know what we're doing. We're right in their area. We're kind of unique. And would somebody sit down and have a cup of coffee with me? All they can do is say no. You know, big deal. And then what you've already done is introduce your organization to them. So when they see some publicity about the radio station or new programming you're doing, they're going to go, pretty cool. And that happened in Wimberley. Private Family Foundation didn't take applications, very closely held. They, in fact, were headquartered out of Texas. They weren't even in our state, but the family still lives in Wimberley. And they heard about what we were doing, and there is a related foundation that we actually had sent an application to. So through those, they called the Wimberley Valley Radio and said, we'll fund you. That's a miracle. It doesn't happen very often, but you can go for that.
And there were very few strings, were there not?
There were no strings.
Amazing.
There were no, and what they wanted to do was make a matching grant. And when you're raising, sometimes we're going to talk about matching grants, but sometimes when you go into foundations, they want to do matching grants. Well, when it's your first funding, those of you who are new stations and you're raising money for your equipment, not a good idea initially. Might be a good idea for your last $50,000 or $20,000 in equipment needs. Not a good idea if you're beginning. So they're generously offering a rather nice amount of money. They want to make it a matching grant. And we were kind of bold and talked to them and said, you know, it's not timely. We really need cash now, a matching grant later. Would you consider just making cash now, and then if we need a matching grant, maybe next year? And that's what they did. So sometimes you just got to be bold. Ask for what you want. See if you can talk to who you need to. But there's a lot of money there. There are community foundations. Those are a little bit different. They take applications. They fund only your community. They're not out funding the next city over. They may be a little wary of something brand new, but if you need to upgrade programming, they might be into that. They're very accessible. You sit down with them. Absolutely sit down with them. Community foundations are pools of money. There are a bunch of people that don't want to run their own foundation, have pooled in, and they will have funds that are donor designated funds, they call them. They may kind of tell the community foundation how they want that money spent, and the foundation will usually honor that, but frankly, once they've done this, it's an IRS thing. They can donate, they can take that money off, they don't have to have a bank, they don't have to have any management for that money, and they get anonymity, because the community foundation does not have to tell where the money came from or where the money went. It's just a slightly different animal. But they're great, and they're super supportive, and they may, if you're brand new, they may want to wait and see. But always go back to them. Corporate and company sponsored are great for media. Those foundations are some small, some large, some specifically are to what their mission is as a corporation. For instance, Home Depot supports Habitat. Makes sense, you know. Mary Kay supports breast cancer research. And if you go to them for things other than that, you're probably not going to be very successful. And there are ways of knowing that, because you're going to go online Almost all of these corporate foundations are online. Not every single one, but almost all of them are. And you're going to look at their mission, and it's under community services or something like that in the company tab. And maybe it's buried in investor relations. But you want to find that community funding, grants, requests, however they've got it listed in their website. Look at their requirements, look at who they've funded. They usually are real proud of that. They're not trying to hide it, it's just not a priority for them. And if there's a variety, then go talk to them. Once again, call the company.
Good question. Are you talking about like general operating funds right now, so not specific program?
We're not talking specific. We're going to talk a
Because
little
if you
bit.
had like a specific program that you wanted to add to your playlist or whatever, and it was going to cost something, and it was related to, for instance, breast cancer, that might be.
That might be. Yeah, think outside the box. That's what I said in business plans yesterday. Think outside the box. Look at who your partners might be. And if there is any way to get them to stretch, or if you know somebody that's employed in that company, especially if you know somebody that's employed in that company, Bentonville,
Yeah.
you know, you've got a pretty good resource there. Huge amount of money that they give away. And they may, if you can go sit down with somebody in their corporate giving department, whether it's for the company, which is a different type of tax write-off for them, they write off advertising money in that pot, or if it's in their foundation, which may or may not be independent of the company. If you can sit down and talk to them about giving, then they're going to tell you what pots work, and sometimes some that they're not publicizing. Once again, that personal contact. And I cannot emphasize enough that you will not send cold applications. Just don't do it. So here's the type of grants. They're going to give capital grants. That's for your construction. Now there are some caveats here on the capital. Capital stuff is usually the easiest to get for your building, for your equipment. The caveat is most foundations will not fund you unless you have been in existence for 3 years. Now, it's not exclusive, and especially family foundations, they are a lot more flexible, more committed to your community, but a lot of them will not fund you till you've been in business. That's because of the Dodd-Frank Act, that they have now greater scrutiny about where they give their money. And the feds really are watching because they have tax-exempt status, a little different from 501c3s, but because they report a little differently, but they have tax-exempt status too. And the feds are watching them very closely because we have had so many foundations that were fronts for terrorist organizations operating out of the United States. So they look real closely at where they're giving their money and are they using it responsibly. And some of the foundations just go overboard, you know. But with media, they're going to want to know what you're doing. So if you've got some record or if you're really involved in the community, then that's not always a big problem. In Wimberley, we were very fortunate because Susan Rayback is a genius, and she had applied for the LPFM construction permit years before and started the 501c3 right then. So when they got their permit, they were ready to do fundraising because they had 3 years of history. They had a community board. They had a little money that had come in. They had some support from their civic groups. The Lions Club, yay, it's the big one. So that support will bump you up. Even though they hadn't been in operation, they hadn't done a thing yet other than create a nice, solid, locally based organization that now can say, yes, we're 3 years old. See? Our IRS 501c3 was issued, and you're going to send that to the foundation. So if you have not applied for that, I suggest you do. If you are not a 501c3, you can still, as long as you have your nonprofit from your state, foundations will talk to you. The larger ones won't. They want you to be a 501c3. Now, if you are a 501c4, and you don't want to operate under that restriction, political kind of restrictions, they can still fund you.
C19.
Yeah, pardon?
19, C19.
I don't know. C4, 3 and C4 are the only ones I've really dealt with. C4s are for civic clubs and advocacy organizations, not necessarily lobby groups, but you are allowed to do more lobbying style stuff under there. So some will fund you if you're C4. All will fund you if you're C3. So capital, you're going to go after first if you're brand new. And it tends to be, bricks and mortar tend to be the easiest to do. And you will see on the 990s if they're funding that. Endowments are permanent pools of money. Wouldn't it be wonderful if you were endowed? I'm pretty sure KUT is, right?
Oh yeah, millions.
Yeah, with millions. It's rare that you're going to go after endowment funds, but it would be very nice for you to have, once you've got your building, your equipment, your operating money, to be able to say, we're going to start putting away some money that's going to do nothing but help us through crisis or give us an interest. So very few small stations are ever in a position to do that, but it's nice if you can, and some do fund endowment. Matching grants are common. If you can say, you know, we have this great community base. We think that we can get smaller donations. If you will give us $25,000, we think we can bring in that other $25,000. Now, and being on air, if you're already on air, that's a whole lot easier to do because you can go on air and say, this hour, this foundation has provided, you know, $10,000, $1,000, whatever, in matching funds. If we raise that similar amount, or they'll match 2 to 1, or whatever that is. And the NPR stations, that's their big thing in their fundraising drives. It works for little stations too. Your community stations, your listeners want to support you.
On the matching grants, how does the timing usually work on when the independent money is raised versus when the match is awarded?
That will be written in your agreement with the foundation, because they're going to write it out and say how long you have to raise the money, and then ordinarily they're going to, once you say we got the money, they're going to pay you the check. And secret, a lot will give you the money anyway, even if you didn't raise the match, because it's a pledge. They may have already booked it. They don't want their money back, but they're not going to want you to tell anybody that.
Do they ever have a match that you have funds in hand, or you're saying we would like to, we have in kind, or we have cash ready to go for this project, but we just need 50% more?
Yeah. Well, that's really not a match. A match is you don't get the money unless you get the money somewhere else.
After the match has been granted.
Right. Now there are some. We'll talk about government grants. The government grant matches are different.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about that, but we're talking about private foundations right now. And for operating, everybody needs operating, and for some reason foundations have been very slow to recognize that they really should be funding this. And it's a big deal with foundations now. They're having help. There are foundation organizations, by the way. There is an association of small foundations. There are larger ones, and they get together on a regular basis and they talk to each other. And one of the things that they are beginning to shift into, two things. One, big impact. That's why I keep emphasizing, and we will cover it. Big impact, so you have to know your impact. Or like, you know, the donors that are doing those big grants, you know, with Zuckerberg and everybody, they are funding huge projects. And everybody wants me to send a request to them for those big monies. Didn't they pledge to give away $2 billion this year? Well, they did, but it's not going to you. Explain Africa. It's going to go for Zika. It's going to go for malaria. It's going to go for world hunger. It's not going to use. So don't waste your time on that one. And then project restricted. So that's where, if you want to produce an environmental program, those are smaller funds. The small family foundations might really love that in your community. So, how do you start? RFPs, requests for proposals, sometimes they're sent out, or they will be on the website. So if the foundation is looking for specific things, they may send out RFPs. They may say, or they may say, we're now accepting proposals. Community foundations especially use the RFP, so you need to stay in contact with them. Open applications are more common. They may have a deadline. They may donate quarterly, once a year sometimes for the small family foundations. It'll either be on the website or it will be, you'll get it with a letter to the foundation or a call. Sometimes it's by invitation only. That's your private little foundations. We do not accept unsolicited applications. You're probably not going to get a lot of those by invitation, but you can begin working on that. Always, before you call anywhere, submit anything, make sure you've got the right information. So this is the perfect time to call them. Even if they do not accept applications, call them and say, just verifying my information. Just want to make sure I'm going to send you a quick little letter and just want to make sure that I'm sending it to the right place. And is so-and-so still the president of the organization, of the foundation? And then get the information, don't go any farther. And then you can call back and say, in a week, can I speak to the president of the organization that you just verified? Just say, this is, Susan Raybuck at Wimberley Valley Radio, and we called last week and would really love to get to visit a minute with Mr. or Mrs. whatever. And sometimes that works remarkably well because they've heard you. It's really not that difficult. It just takes some guts and time, right? You have to be
Guts and time.
Time, yes. So we're going to lay the foundation. Okay, now you've done your research, you know who you're going to send it to, you've done your basic contacts. You got to get it on paper. This is where, you can fail in any of the states, any of these phases by just not doing them. This is the one you fail out by not doing it well. So let's not fail at it. If it's a group, you should be talking to the board of directors. You should be talking with staff. Writing a foundation grant is not an individual activity. You've got to gather a lot of information. You'll be surprised. Identify the projects you want to have done. Check out your funding opportunities for those projects. That's a lot, right? You want to look at every aspect of that project before you start writing a word. No matter what you're going to be asking money for, go get this done. Use your checklist. So now you're ready. You know what you want to do. Keep it simple. When I was with the American Cancer Society, writing grants for 6 states for 6 years, I would have field staff send me like what they thought was a grant application and ask me to take a look at it. We hired only people with bachelor's degrees or more. These were smart people. Their applications were beautiful. So, I would be in the process of rewriting because they missed so much. And they were very wordy. They would repeat things. They would oversell. You do not want to oversell. some heart in it, yes, but you don't ever overpromise. You don't oversell your organization. If there are issues, maybe you want to step around those a little bit, but not oversell. Avoid jargon. The radio industry is huge on that. No jargon. They are not going to know. Jim had to translate almost everything for me.
And I should note, vice versa, if I can jump in real quick. You got 35 years of experience, right? This is old hat. If you're lucky to get someone like this, a semi-retired person who has mutual interests, radio, community, neighborhood, you're lucky. But what we found, Austin Airways, which is not a radio station, but we already have a lot of the documents that a person like this is going to ask for. I need your 501c3, your Secretary of State, your Controller's ID. I need your board resolution. I need your board members, a whole shopping list. We've got all those on the computer. They're in a vinyl pages in a folder on the shelf. You should start building up that little inventory of your legal ID so that when you apply for things, not just for a big grant, but for the county arts commission or something. So build up a little inventory of who you are so you're not digging around and passing a resolution on the phone, all that. That when she says, I had to translate radio stuff to her, she had to translate grant writing stuff to me, but most of the stuff that she needed, I could put in the computer and have it to her the next day.
But not everybody was in that position. Wimberley Valley was absolutely brand new. They didn't have financials, They had had maybe $20 a year come through, in the last 3 years. So they really hadn't done real financials. It doesn't matter how old you are. You really have to have your financial reports, your balance sheets, and your statement of expenditures and revenues, whatever your accountant is calling those. Yes?
I was just going to say I've written several grants, and what I always try to do is imagine that I am the foundation receiving a big pile of these things. And I think, oh God, another one.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that.
Try to make it so you grab them.
Yeah, they're looking to eliminate you because foundations generally fund 1 out of 10, and some a whole lot less than that. My record with the American Cancer Society was 50%. We did well, but I was working for a national organization with huge projects, big vision. So you're going to do an executive summary. There's a little description on your handouts about that. And it's very concise, less than a page. It's going to tell, almost all foundations want that because it gives them a quick summary. And that's usually, if they've got staff, that's what's going to go to the board. The staff is going to read your whole proposal, up or down. If it's up, they're going to send the executive summary to the board. So it's got to be very clear, very concise, but short. If it isn't, they are going to do the cutting. And there is no telling what's going to be in or out when it goes to the board. So give them something that they can hand to the board. You'll do a statement of need. Who's going to benefit? How do you know they need this? Have you done surveys? How do we know we need a radio station anyway? How do we know we need a new program on river ecology? Well, the Blanco River flooded and wiped out all of the ecology, and we need programming to help people that live along the Blanco reestablish the environment, that riparian environment. Click to add text. I don't want to do that. You're going to choose the facts that support your project. Be accurate. Choose local, statewide, or national stats to support your case. Oh, I know.
I think you skipped a slide.
Mm-hmm. And I can tell you why. There we go. I think I touched the pad. There we go. Yeah, my computer, I disabled that. I can't put my hand on it and go to the End of the presentation. So there are statistics available, and we talked about that in the session yesterday on your business plans. Census.gov, citydata.com can give you the stats that you need to support your project. Ah, that is very weird. I have no idea why it's saying click to add text, but I'm not adding any. Avoid overstatement, avoid emotional appeals. Now, that doesn't mean you can't hit the heart. You know, when we talked about Wimberley Valley Radio after the flood, we talked about 300 homes that washed down the river and 9 people that died. So that doesn't mean you can't touch the heart, but that's not all they need. Foundations are very fact-based. You know, yes, that will touch them. For the Cancer Society, we talk about the people who have survived cancer, you know, or the people that are in treatment that need Hope Lodge and how that happens and how supportive it is. You know, we touch the heart, but they need the facts. Absolutely, do not ever let your situation seem hopeless to somebody that you're asking for money. If we don't get this, we're going to go out of business, we won't be able to start the station. The only thing that we have said recently is, you know, there's a window for LPFM. There's a window to get this up and running, 18 months, and you know, if we don't hit our window to get the station up and running, we've lost the station. And that's a fact. So it's not doom and gloom, it's just a fact. So why is this different? Why are you different from commercial radio? They don't have a clue. No one that you're asking for money knows why you're commercial, not commercial. What the difference is. Why should they fund you? Why should they fund you instead of the NPR station that you can't, your community can't even get reception for? So you may have to explain that to them. Don't criticize. It's tempting. They need us because this organization just isn't doing the job. Well, you can say, you know, Wimberley Valley Radio is important to the Wimberley Valley area because the other stations don't reach us. And when they do, they're not covering our local news. But don't badmouth them. They're not, you know, all they do is this or all they do is that.
All they do is
You know,
ask for money.
Yeah, all they do is ask us for money. We're asking for money. So we're right there with them. But never, yeah, yes, the facts. We say that the TV and radio stations coming out of Austin and San Antonio absolutely cannot cover local events. They just can't. And they have extreme difficulty in times of emergencies. They can't cover them because in Wimberley they can't get there because everything's flooded, as Jim will knows. You know, there are back routes you may know, probably not. So the facts, but don't badmouth anybody. You never know who's on their board. Focus on collaborative efforts if you have collaborations, if you're going to be working with a high school, a college, a civic group. Very important. It doesn't have to be long, a couple of paragraphs. The statement of need. Project description is your nuts and bolts. How are you going to do what you say you're going to do? Here's how we're going to get from here to here. This is where people have problems in new organizations or media organizations or advocacy organizations, is the measurable outcomes. Objectives are your measurable outcomes. What are we going to do? This is the objective. We want to do programming on this. We want emergency stuff. We want to do program on this. We want to do programming. The objective is not necessarily to open a radio station. That's your mission, right? So, tangible, specific, Measurable and achievable. You know, how many programs are you going to do? And be very realistic. So if you're talking about program money for environmental issues, how are you going to go about doing that? How much of it you're going to do, and how are you going to measure that? So we want to do one program a week, and that's easy to measure. And then we're going to talk about outputs and outcomes. So the methods are your how. So your objective is to offer environmental programs. Your method is to recruit the director, announcer, somebody's going to do these programs, right? Or you might contract for somebody existing that there's a really great program out there through whatever, Pacifica or whatever, or somebody that you know locally that does these, and you can contract. You don't have to invent the wheel. So how are you going to get there? Outcomes. We want to know, is there a baseline? What difference are these programs going to make? So what if you do an environmental program? What do you want it to result in? So what if you're going to do a community radio station? So what? That's the question the foundation's going to be asking, because they're looking to kick you out, not put you in. They've got lots of requests. They need to know the so whats. They also want numbers. So how are you going to get to numbers? You're a radio station. You're on the airwaves. There are different ways that you can get to numbers. They don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be super accurate. They just want to know that you're trying to find out if you're making a difference in the world. Because that's what they want their money to do, is make a difference in the world. So how do you know if you're making a difference in the world? And if you are not doing this, please do find out if you're making a difference in the world. So some of those are objectives you might use for that particular. Now, outputs are different than outcomes. Outputs are how many's. We're going to do this many programs. We're going to reach this many people with that programming. We're going to, whatever the numbers are, that's outputs. We want to see outputs, but more and more, the foundations are going to outcomes. So figure out how to integrate that into your proposal and how you're going to measure it. And you've got to evaluate somehow. Figure it out. Of course, an evaluation for getting a station on the air is, are you on the air on a timely basis? You know, are you able to retain that construction permit? That's pretty obvious. You know, building, did you build the building? But a program, outcomes. And how are you going to do that? What's the time frame for you? 18 months if you're starting a new station, maybe? What do you need? And if you have done your business plan, like I told you yesterday, those of you who are in that session, this is easy. You've already got all this stuff. You've already thought about what you need. How sustainable is this? So if they give you money, can you keep this station running? And how do you know you can? If they give you money for this new program, can you keep it running once their grant's gone? And how do you know you can?
What's the answer to that one?
Well, you've got to figure out the answer to that one, because if you don't have a good plan for continuing this, they're not going to fund you. This is the one that most new grant writers fail, is how are we going to keep it going? Unless it's a one-time thing, but how are we going to keep the programming going once the foundation's funds drop out? Because mostly they're not going to fund you forever. There are a few you may hit, and I think Wimberley's, the two that fund Wimberley will probably kind of continue doing that. But in general, that's not going to happen. Your budget is very important. It's got to make sense. They've got to read it. Sometimes it's got to be in their format. But do your budget well. We're going to kind of go quickly through this because we're going to run out of time if we don't. But now, when you're giving it the presentation, please be sure to do it exactly as the foundation asks for it. They, in general, don't want fancy folders. They don't want things generally stapled. They don't want colored paper, and there are reasons for this. It's because you're going to send them one copy of your proposal, right? Or maybe it's online. They're going to copy that for the whole board and give them either excerpts from it. The board may want to see some of your attachments, so they may copy that, and they will put a folder together of all the grants requests that have come in for that quarterly board meeting, and they're not going to include odd items. And if it's not in the format they want, they're not going to be happy. And if you've stapled things, they're going to have to unstaple it if they say don't staple. So I actually don't staple anything. It all goes in paperclip. You can, if they say you may submit extra information, do it. Send your brochures. Sometimes not. This is what I use on the workshops that are longer. We actually go through how would you get funding to do something like this. You want to provide the virtual Caribbean tranquility pods. Because stress moms and dads make for bad moms and dads, which create children at risk, right? So, we walk through all of the steps we just talked about. And how do you get tranquility pods funding, and where are you going to look for funding for those, and how are you going to find that? And it's a fun exercise, and you might sit down and use that rather than your own, just as a quick evaluation of, do I have these concepts down? It takes a longer workshop than that. They are going to ask for your organizational history, sometimes as a supplement. Sometimes it'll be the first thing. Be very concise. They are not looking for 3 pages of this happened this year, this happened this year, this happened this year. No, they just want to know, we founded this group of volunteers 5 years ago, and 3 years ago we received our 501c3, and we got our construction permit, and we've developed now strong community relationship with this group and this group. They don't need a long history. And then I always put in a conclusion if there's a spot. If it's an online application, they probably don't have this. But I like to just kind of pull the grant request together in a concluding paragraph. You tell them at the front, you've got the executive summary, and at the end, just to remind them what all those little pieces are. Just a very short, 1-paragraph conclusion. Finishing touches here. Just talked about packaging it, no staples, unless they say staples. I've had one that said send 9 copies or 12 copies stapled. It's not back front, don't do the backs, and don't copy the attachments. But grant requests, that you have to be careful. Check everything. I'm pretty good at finding everybody else's grammatical errors, and spell check and grammar check help me a lot on my own. But I can read a document that I've written 5 times and still submit it with an error.
Yep.
And especially if I'm doing it online. There is something about online that, maybe it's my spell check changes things. Have you ever had text? When you're texting somebody and it changes a word and you go, oh my God, I can't believe I just said that. Happens. So always, always have other eyes. Cover letters almost always are wanted. You're going to duplicate the information, basically, that you put in your proposal. You must put an amount. Some people I've seen don't want to tell the foundation how much to give them. Whatever you're willing to give us is fine. Wrong. No, tell them what you want, how much you need. You've already done your research to know that they give $25,000 to that organization every year. Ask for what you think they'll give you.
Can I ask a question about this?
Sure.
Two things. I like your opinion. I've asked for specific amounts, and at the very end, I've said in the concluding paragraph, we would graciously receive whatever you gave us. Is that a mistake?
I wouldn't do that.
Okay.
Of course, they know you will.
Okay.
And they may give you less than you ask for.
But don't say it. Okay.
I'm not giving them that option.
The other thing came up in a local foundation that turned us down 4 years in a row, and I called them up and just dialogued with them. And I says, well, maybe give us a range. So I gave them a range, and they ended up giving us the lower amount the first time they funded us. And so, what do you think about a range idea?
That's rare.
Okay.
And that would be your initial call to that foundation, or once they say no the first time, instead of going through 4 years, call them and saying, we're getting to that.
Okay.
Very few want you to give them a range. They want you to say, we need $20,000 from you, and you already know now that that's a realistic amount for them. They may the first time give you less than that, or they may call and say, if we just give you that.
In this particular case, I said, if you give us this amount, we can do this. If you give us this amount, we can do this. If you can give us this amount, we can do this. And they ended up giving us a lower amount, but at least they gave us something.
Yeah, most foundations, frankly, are going to give you less than what you asked for the first time you approach. Anyway.
Okay. So it's implied.
Yeah, it's implied. And I've always hated those, we can feed 50 children with this amount. We feed 100 children with twice that. These are smart people. They made all this money that's in this pot of money they want to give to you. They can figure that out. They know that if they give you less money, you can do less. It's a no-brainer. So I actually wouldn't, with the American Cancer Society, I wouldn't send those brochures that said, we can do this with this and this with this. It just made me crazy.
Another thing is if you do get some money from one foundation or one supporter, you can oftentimes you can say we got this much from them and we just need this much more to be able to do the full amount. And that will oftentimes then they're not the first people investing in you.
Well, yeah, and they're often going to ask you that. Who else have you submitted requests to? And they talk. So they probably are going to know who has funded you, and they're probably going to ask anyway. Be sure that it's okay with your other funders to say who they are. One of the foundations that funded Wimberley is an anonymous foundation generally, and they said don't put our name on anything, which is fine. But we said, well, can we tell other foundations that you funded us? Oh, sure, other foundations, they know what we do anyway. So, yeah. Do a cover page if it's a hard copy. Something like that. Has all your contact information so they can get to it quickly. If you're going to do a table of contents, you got a lot of stuff in there. We've already talked about most of these.
I'll report.
So, what about other things like letters of
Very good.
intent? Some foundations just want a letter as a proposal. A letter of intent, often they're asking for, that's your first screening. So it's the opportunity in 1 or 2 pages to say, this is what we want to do if you give us this amount of money. And so may we please submit a full proposal. It's usually 1 or 2 pages. This is what you've got to have. If you don't have them, get them now. If you're too small and have never had an audit, that's fine by the foundation. But if you are 5 years old, 10 years old, you've had, $100,000 run through your bank accounts, they kind of want to make sure that you've been audited so that they know for sure that your money's going where you say it is. Send thank yous, no matter what. Be high touch. Keep in contact, even if they say no. Track your grants. Do progress reports if they ask for them, and even if they don't. Pictures. Here's what we were talking about. This says there's a 92, 926, the Neals. There is a mailbox there. And then there is a big, huge trash can. This just seemed to make a lot more sense. Now we just take out the mail we want and leave the rest. So that trash can is not where you want your proposal to end up. That's where 90% of the proposals end up. Do it right. Take the trouble. What happens if they say no? They will. If they're going to only fund 10% of the proposals they get and they've never heard from you before.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, absolutely. You say thank you. You send a letter. You ask if you tell them that you would certainly like to reapply. You make a phone call. Why didn't we get it? And if it's one of those that just won't talk to you, and there are some, just won't talk to the applicants, find somebody that knows them, even if it's 6 degrees of separation. Find somebody that knows them, because you can eventually get this money. This group is going to be Foundation's hot button. You're going to find it because you do almost everything that they fund. You link communities, you build communities, you are incredibly effective in disasters. You do what they want to have done. You touch people, you provide entertainment, education. Now, if you're simply a music station, it's going to be harder. If you're a religious station, it's harder. You just got to appeal to the ones that are religious. But those are even out there, and you can see on their 990s. But always follow up. Don't take that as a, no, we will never fund you if you have done your research and think that they will. A well-constructed proposal will sell itself. It might not sell it the first time you submit it. You may have to follow up. You may have to do it a second time. And just quick, we've talked mostly about private foundations here, but I did tell you to go to grants.gov. There are federal and state grants that will fund things that you do. Right now we're applying to USDA in the region that we're in for a rural development grant for our Eleanor LaGrange station. Lots of work. Government grants are lots of work, and you think you're done with it, and they ask for another form. It's like your station FCC stuff. But they can be quite good. That rural development grant, you've got to have a population of under 50,000 in your, they say in your community, so it'd be like your city. And it has to be below a certain percentage of poverty level. And it graduates. So there are government grants out there. We're hoping we're going to get this. We've got pretty far on it so far, so it's a possibility. And it looks like for Eleanor LaGrange, if we get the grant, they're going to fund 35% of all of our development costs. Our equipment, our studio build out, our emergency equipment stuff. So they're worth going for. And if you don't get it, once again, the first time, try again. And the government will talk to you. They will tell you why you didn't get it. And they'll help you redo it. We just got one from the Lower Colorado River Authority for Wimberley. Took us 2 years. But it's for the emergency generating equipment. So, you know, they're giving us, I think, 20,000 for emergency generating equipment. We put up a 21% match. That's how much we had to come up with. They're definitely worth going for. I'm not an expert in government grants for radio stations, so I can't probably answer specific questions about yours. But they are out there. Do your research, talk to other people, or just call. You know, if it looks kind of like, if you're on grants.gov or Grant Watch, you'll see some of these come across Grant Watch. If it looks like kind of they might work, call that organization and talk to them about the guidelines.